Hello, my name is Erin Lastman, and this is my video recording for children's literature. The book that I did this week was a Newbery Award winner, and I read The 21 Balloons by William Pene Du Bois. This is a children's fiction book, and it is an adventure story. It is about a man named Professor William Sherman, and he decides to travel around the world on a balloon float, basically. He does not make it around the world. He lands on the island of Krakatoa that's supposed to be uninhabited, and he finds 20 families living there. These families have developed their own government, their own civilization, and their own way of life. They are all incredibly wealthy because they are the only ones that have access to the world's biggest diamond mine. They are wealthier than everyone else in the world. They have found a way to deal with this by doing things as fairly as possible. So everyone on the island has been given their own name. Families are named from the alphabet, letters A through T. So there's Mr. and Mrs. A, Mr. and Mrs. B, Mr. and Mrs. C. And if they have children, those are children A1, A2, and so on. Each family owns a restaurant based on their letter of the alphabet. So Mr. and Mrs. A own an American restaurant, Mr. and Mrs. B own a British chop house, Mr. and Mrs. C own a Chinese restaurant, and so on and so forth. And everybody eats at the restaurants in order every rotation. So on the first day, everybody eats at Mr. and Mrs. A's restaurant. The next day, everybody eats at Mr. and Mrs. B's restaurant. It's all very fair and very orderly. They each have their own style houses based on a country that coincides with their letter. So Mr. and Mrs. A have an American style house. Mr. and Mrs. F have a French style house. And Mr. M has a Moroccan style house. And this is the way that they deal with being wealthy in their civilization. They decide that Professor Sherman will be kind of a forever guest. He won't be introduced into the society. However, as he's sharing some of his invention ideas with them, they realize that the volcano on Krakatoa is going to explode, and they need to leave. So he helps them all get balloons together, and they sail off as the island is erupting. The volcano is erupting, destroying the island. He drops them all off in their respective countries. Mr. and Mrs. A go to America, Mr. and Mrs. B go to Britain, Mr. and Mrs. I go to India, and so on and so forth. And then he crash lands in the Atlantic Ocean, where he is rescued and shares his story. It is, like I said, an adventure story. It's not one that I really can relate to another book. It's very different, very unique. It definitely is a reading for some older kids, at least 4th grade, if not even older. But it's a great story and very interesting, and the adventure storyline in this is just wonderful. Thank you.